Officer Michael Walker, a Denver police officer, was driving home through a blinding snowstorm when three German shepherds appeared on the deserted road, huddled together against the cold. At first, he thought they were strays, but when one limped toward his headlights, eyes full of something more than fear, he knew this wasn't ordinary.
Are you cold,
Beside
buddy?
him, his newlywed
It's
wife
so
Sarah urged
cold.
him to stop.
Good dogs.
Together,
We're
they
almost
led
there.
the shivering dogs into the
Are you
warmth of their
cold,
car,
buddy?
unaware
You
that
did
their
so
act of
well.
kindness would uncover a buried
dogs.
secret, one that would test their courage, their love, and everything they believed about loyalty. Please support us by subscribing to the channel. Denver, Colorado, was buried beneath a sky of gray steel. The city breathed in frost and exhaled silence. Wind slashed through the empty streets, carrying the sting of snow that refused to stop falling. Streetlights flickered weakly above Colfax Avenue, their glow swallowed by the storm. Even the mountains in the distance were gone, hidden behind a white wall of ice and sky. It was the kind of night that made people hurry home, lock their doors, and thank heaven they weren't still outside. Officer Michael Walker drove slowly through the storm, his gloved hands tight around the steering wheel of his patrol SUV. He was 34, tall, with the kind of shoulders that filled a doorway and a face carved in calm, careful lines. His jaw was squared and dusted with the stubble of a long shift, and his eyes, a tired shade of blue-gray, held the steady alertness of a man who'd seen too much. Years on the force had trained him to expect the worst on quiet nights like this. The city's silence wasn't peace, it was warning. Beside him sat Sarah Walker, his wife of just 6 months. She was slender and tall, wrapped in a thick wool coat the color of storm clouds. Her skin was pale, almost luminous in the dashlight, and her hair, warm chestnut with hints of auburn, fell in loose waves to her shoulders. Sarah worked as an emergency nurse, the kind of woman who carried calm into chaos and warmth into rooms that smelled of fear. She had spent the last 12 hours in a hospital full of coughing children and broken bones, yet her eyes still glowed softly when she looked at her husband. They drove in silence for a while, the windshield wipers keeping rhythm with the storm. "Hard to believe this city still sleeps," Sarah murmured, watching the flakes dance in the headlights. "Denver never sleeps," Mike said with a faint smile. "It just hides when it's scared." The humor was thin, but she smiled anyway. That was how they survived, his weary realism and her quiet defiance of it. As they passed under a bridge near the edge of town, Sarah leaned forward suddenly. "Mike, stop!" He hit the brakes, tires crunching against packed snow. The headlights caught a shape beneath the overpass. No, 3 shapes, huddled together in a shallow pit of wind-blown snow. For a moment, it looked like discarded coats or trash bags. Then one of them moved. "Dogs," Sarah whispered. They stepped out of the car into the biting air. Snow swirled around them like frozen ash. Beneath the bridge, 3 German shepherds pressed close to one another, trembling. Their fur was matted with ice, their ribs faintly visible under layers of dirt and frost. One was large and broad-shouldered, with a gray muzzle that hinted at age, Rex. His eyes, amber and unflinching, watched Mike's every movement. The second, Scout, was smaller, leaner, with one ear bent and a nervous energy that made him shift between the others. The third, Sable, was the youngest, barely more than a year old, with soft, dark fur and a limp that made Sarah's heart clench. "They've been out here for days," she said, crouching carefully. Mike nodded, scanning the ground. No prints but theirs. No collar tags either. His voice carried that measured calm of a man cataloging pain into evidence. Someone dumped them. Sable whimpered, pressing closer to Rex's chest. Rex didn't growl or move, just lowered his head slightly, as if shielding the others with the last of his strength. Snow clung to his lashes like frost to glass. Sarah shrugged off her coat and wrapped it around the smallest one. "Hey there," she whispered, her voice breaking through the wind. "You're safe now." Mike stood behind her, torn between duty and instinct. "We should call animal control. They'll freeze out here." "No," she said quickly, looking up at him. "You know what'll happen. They'll lock them in cages until they run out of space. They don't need that." He hesitated. He'd seen the kennels, rows of eyes staring through bars, waiting for owners who'd never come. But he also knew 3 half-starved shepherds could be dangerous if frightened. Still, something in Rex's steady gaze stopped him. Those eyes weren't wild. They were tired, haunted even. He knelt beside them. "Easy, boy," he murmured, extending his gloved hand. Rex's nose twitched, then brushed his fingertips. The contact was brief but powerful, like an oath exchanged in silence. Sarah smiled faintly. "See? He trusts you." Mike exhaled, the cloud of his breath mixing with the snow. "Or he's too cold to care." But there was no bite in his tone anymore, only resignation, and a flicker of compassion he hadn't felt in a long time. They coaxed the 3 dogs toward the patrol SUV. Scout hesitated first, circling once before climbing in. Sable followed with a quiet whine, tail tucked low. Rex came last, slow and deliberate, glancing back once at the empty bridge before stepping up into the warmth. As Mike closed the trunk, Sarah brushed snow from her hair. "You did the right thing," she said softly. He didn't answer. The truth was he wasn't sure. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was fate. But when he looked at them, 3 lives abandoned to die beneath the city's first snow, he couldn't turn away. He climbed into the driver's seat, glancing at the rearview mirror. 3 pairs of eyes looked back at him. Hope, confusion, and something else. Recognition. They drove off into the night, tires carving tracks through the endless white. For a moment, everything was still. Just the hum of the engine, the sound of Sarah's gentle breathing, and the storm pressing against the glass. Then, behind them, a pair of headlights emerged from the storm. A black SUV followed at a measured distance, its beams slicing through the snow like watchful eyes. Sarah noticed first. "Mike, that car's been behind us since the bridge," checked the mirror again, pulse quickening. The SUV didn't pass, didn't fall back. It just followed, slow and deliberate. Mike's hand drifted to his sidearm out of habit, but he said nothing. The storm thickened, and for a heartbeat, the lights vanished behind the snowdrift. Then they reappeared, closer this time. Sarah reached for his arm. "Mike?" He forced a calm smile, though his eyes stayed on the mirror. "It's probably nothing." But deep down, he knew better. As they turned toward home, the dark vehicle idled at the corner, its headlights fixed on them like a silent promise. And in the back seat, the 3 shepherds lifted their heads in unison, ears pricked, as if they too could feel that something dangerous had just begun. The storm had passed, leaving Denver wrapped in a muffled quiet. The kind that followed after nature's rage had exhausted itself. The Walkers' small house on the city's northern edge sat like a warm island in a sea of white. The porch creaked beneath the weight of fresh snow, icicles glinting in the pale dawn light. Inside, the faint hum of the heater blended with the soft breathing of 3 dogs, who for the first time in days slept without fear. Rex, the oldest, lay nearest to the fireplace. His coat, a blend of silver and sable, shimmered under the glow of the flames. Though calm, there was a heaviness in his amber eyes, an awareness of the world beyond the walls. Scout, smaller and restless, paced from window to door, tail flicking with every faint sound from the street. Sable, the youngest, curled against Sarah's legs where she sat on the rug, her long hair still damp from an early shower, her cheeks glowing from the heat. Sarah had changed since that night under the bridge. The memory of the black SUV still haunted her, though she tried to dismiss it as coincidence. Her compassionate nature made her want to believe the best in people. But something about those headlights, how they had lingered, remained lodged in her thoughts like a splinter. She ran her fingers gently along Sable's neck, feeling the texture of old scars beneath the fur. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" she whispered. From the kitchen, Mike watched her. He had changed too, though he'd never admit it. His uniform jacket hung on the back of a chair, his holstered sidearm on the counter beside a half-drained mug of coffee. The lines around his mouth had deepened in the past few days, not from age but from unease. A veteran cop learns to trust instinct, and his instincts told him this wasn't over. "You know," he said, his voice low, "it's been 3 days and nobody's reported missing dogs. Nothing." Sarah looked up, her hazel eyes steady. "Maybe they didn't belong to anyone." Mike frowned. "Every dog belongs to someone, Sarah. Even the ones people pretend they don't." He had spent his off-duty hours checking databases, talking to animal control, even calling nearby precincts. Nothing. No one missing 3 German shepherds. But in one of the old police archives, a name had appeared, a closed case from 8 months earlier. A warehouse explosion on the outskirts of the city. Among the unconfirmed casualties were several K-9 units. The file had been buried deep under bureaucracy and negligence. Too deep. Mike rubbed his forehead, the memory of the SUV's headlights flashing in his mind. He'd seen the same model before, government issue used by federal contractors and special task forces. Whoever had followed them wasn't some curious stranger. The doorbell startled them both. Scout barked sharply, Sable echoed with a growl, and Rex rose to his feet without a sound, his gaze fixed on the door like a soldier waiting for a command. Mike opened the door cautiously. A woman stood on the porch, wrapped in a thick gray parka, her breath visible in the cold. She was in her late 50s, with weathered skin and eyes the color of pale cornflower. "Sorry to bother you," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I live 2 houses down. I heard dogs. Haven't seen shepherds in this neighborhood since the blizzard started." Mike studied her posture, nervous but not deceitful. "We found them under the bridge," he said. They were half frozen. The woman's gaze softened as she stepped closer, looking past him. "Poor souls. My name's Mrs. Carter," she added. "Helen Carter." The name caught Mike like a hook. "Carter?" he repeated. "Any relation to Mason Carter?" Her expression changed, lips tightening. "He was my brother," she said after a pause. "But he's been dead to me for years. Why?" Mike hesitated. "He was connected to a case I'm looking into. Warehouse fire off Cherry Creek. You might have heard about it." Helen nodded slowly. "Mason worked there. Whatever he was mixed up in, it wasn't clean. After that fire, he disappeared. I don't know what happened to him. And honestly, I don't want to." Her eyes drifted to the 3 shepherds resting near the hearth. He had dogs like those, trained, fierce but loyal. Rex lifted his head then, amber eyes locked on her as if recognizing the voice. For a moment, the woman's breath caught. "Oh, my lord," she whispered. "That one. He looks just like Shadow, Mason's old lead dog." Mike exchanged a look with Sarah. "Shadow?" Helen nodded. "He never went anywhere without him." The wind howled outside, shaking the windows. Helen's words lingered like smoke. "If these are Mason's dogs," Mike said carefully, "someone wanted them gone." Helen's face turned pale. "Then you should be careful, officer. My brother made enemies, and not the kind that forgive." She glanced nervously over her shoulder. "Sometimes at night I still see a black SUV down the street. Thought it was my imagination." Mike's stomach tightened. "You're sure?" She nodded. "Always after midnight." After she left, silence reclaimed the house. Sarah knelt beside Rex, touching the faint patch of missing fur along his neck. Beneath it, her fingers brushed something metallic, a small rectangular bump hidden in the thickness of his collar line. "Mike," she said, voice low. "Come here." He crouched beside her, using a small flashlight from his belt. Embedded just beneath the fur was a micro GPS tracker, no larger than a coin. He pried it loose carefully. The device still blinked, a soft red pulse against his palm. "Someone's been tracking them," Sarah whispered. Mike's jaw hardened. "Then they know exactly where we are." Outside, the wind rose again, blowing snow against the windows like ghostly fingers. Rex stood at the doorway, tail stiff, eyes locked on the dark street beyond. The other two dogs followed his stance, their ears pricked. Somewhere in that silence, beneath the hum of the heater and the sigh of the storm, came the faintest sound. A car engine idling not far away. Mike looked toward the window. For an instant, headlights flashed through the swirling snow. The same black SUV. Waiting. By the next morning, the storm had returned with a vengeance, swallowing Denver under a curtain of white. The Walkers' small house seemed to tremble in the wind, its windows fogged from the contrast between the biting cold outside and the strained heat within. Officer Michael Walker stood at the kitchen counter, his expression carved in fatigue as he examined the tiny GPS tracker lying on a napkin. The red light had gone dark overnight, but not before he'd sent it to the department's technical division for analysis. The report had come back just before dusk. The last recorded ping originated from an abandoned industrial zone on the southern edge of Denver, a cluster of warehouses long since condemned after a fire nearly a year earlier. He read the report twice, each time slower than before. The name tied to the site made his stomach tighten. Carter Freight and Storage. He said nothing to Sarah immediately. She'd spent the morning tending to the dogs, her gentle voice steadying them through the storm's restless noises. When she finally joined him, brushing a strand of chestnut hair from her tired face, her eyes caught the worry lines deepening around his mouth. "What is it, Mike?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then turned the paper toward her. The tracker was last active near an old Carter warehouse. Same name as Mason Carter. Her brow furrowed. "You think it's connected?" "I don't think anything in this mess is coincidence anymore," he replied. His voice carried the calm tone of a man who'd learned long ago that fear never helped, but his hands, tightening around the cup of coffee, betrayed the truth. That evening, as the storm built again, power flickered across the neighborhood. Shadows stretched and wavered along the walls like restless spirits. The heater hummed unevenly, its rhythm broken by the occasional creak of settling ice. Rex, stationed near the back door, remained alert. His ears twitched with every gust of wind. Scout paced restlessly, nose pressed to the gap under the window frame, while Sable lay close to Sarah's legs, her tail flicking each time thunder rumbled above. Mike sat near the window with his radio on low volume. He'd called in a favor earlier that day. Detective Ryan Hallbrook, an old friend from the force, promised to check the warehouse records. Ryan was a broad man in his 40s, with a salt and pepper beard and a crooked nose from too many bar fights before he'd joined the police. He was sharp but disillusioned, the kind of detective who'd learned that justice didn't always wear a badge. Mike trusted him because Ryan didn't waste words and didn't scare easy. When the phone finally buzzed, Mike picked up instantly. "Talk to me." Ryan's gravelly voice came through the static. "You were right. The warehouse is bad news. Officially condemned, but someone's been using the place. Fresh tire marks, cigarette butts, footprints. Not kids either. 2. Organized?" Mike's chest tightened. "Anyone still there?" "Not when I looked. But listen, Walker. If this ties back to Mason Carter, tread carefully. The guy was mixed up with private contractors before he disappeared. Off-the-books jobs, black market training. That tracker of yours? Military grade. Someone with real resources is watching." The line crackled, then went dead. Outside, the wind howled, the lights dimmed, then flickered back weakly. Sarah appeared in the doorway holding a lantern. "Power's acting up again," she said. Before Mike could answer, Scout let out a sharp bark, spinning toward the back of the house. Rex rose immediately, head low, muscles tense. Sable followed, growling deep in her throat. Mike grabbed his flashlight and moved toward the kitchen, Sarah close behind. "Stay behind me," he murmured. The beam of light cut through the dimness, landing on the glass door that led to the backyard. For a moment, the snow beyond looked peaceful. Then something moved. A shadow darted past the window, fast and deliberate. Sarah gasped, but Mike was already moving. He swung the door open, light sweeping across the yard. Fresh footprints led from the gate to the porch, deep and recent. Snow still fell in heavy sheets, but these tracks hadn't been there minutes ago. "Someone's been here," Mike whispered. The words had barely left his mouth when the sound split the air. A single, sharp gunshot, the bullet sparking off the metal railing beside him. He dropped instinctively, grabbing Sarah and pulling her inside. "Get down!" The dogs erupted. Rex lunged toward the open door, followed by Sable, their growls fierce against the wind. Scout barked once, sharp and commanding, then leapt after them. Mike shouted for them to stop, but they were already gone, vanishing into the swirling white. "Mike!" Sarah's voice trembled. "We have to get them!" He grabbed his sidearm, jaw set. "Stay inside and lock the door. But another sound stopped him. From outside came a low, guttural bark, then a second shot, fainter, muffled by distance. The storm swallowed everything after that. Silence pressed down, broken only by the hiss of snow against the glass. Mike's pulse hammered. He took a step toward the door, then froze, on the threshold, illuminated by the flashlight's beam. A thin trail of red smeared across the porch. Blood, bright against the snow. It led away from the house, curving into the storm's white wall, disappearing where the light could not reach. He stood there, every instinct screaming to follow, but reason, hard-earned and cruel, held him back. If whoever was out there wanted them dead, stepping into that storm blind would only make it easier. Still, the silence felt unbearable. Sarah's hands clutched his arm. "Mike." Which one was hit? He looked out into the snow, his throat dry. The trail was too narrow to tell. I don't know, he said finally, voice hollow. But I'm going after them. She shook her head, eyes wide with fear and love. Then I'm going with you. He opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, the wind shifted, and somewhere in the distance a single bark echoed through the night, weak but defiant, before fading into nothing. The world outside the window turned to silence. Only the red line remained, leading into the blizzard like a whisper of what waited beyond. The storm had thinned to a curtain of white mist by the time Mike followed the trail out of town. The crimson streak that had marked the snow behind his house was faint now, half buried by wind and sleet, but his eyes never left it. Every instinct he had, cop, husband, protector, screamed to move faster. His breath came in sharp bursts against the cold. Snowflakes clung to his beard, freezing on contact. Behind him, Sarah trudged through the drifts, her cheeks raw from the wind, her auburn hair pulled tight under a wool cap. She'd refused to stay home, and he'd stopped arguing once he saw the determination blazing in her eyes. "There are dogs, Mike," she'd said. "They'd do the same for us." He couldn't deny that. They drove as far south as the roads would allow before the patrol truck stalled on a sheet of ice. Beyond the edge of the highway stretched a landscape of skeletal warehouses, abandoned, half-collapsed, their windows boarded and roofs sagging under snow. The sign, barely visible through frost, read, "Carter Freight and Storage," the same name that had haunted every lead since this began. Mike checked his pistol, adjusted the flashlight on his vest, and motioned for Sarah to stay behind him. They crossed into the yard, boots crunching over glass and frozen gravel. The wind carried strange sounds, a metallic rattle, a muffled groan of machinery still alive somewhere deep within. The closer they moved to the main warehouse, the stronger the smell of oil and rust grew. Sarah stopped, gasping softly. Ahead of them, half buried under snow near a loading bay, Sable limped toward them. Her black and tan coat was streaked with blood from a shallow wound along her shoulder, but her tail wagged weakly when she saw them. "Oh my God, Sable," Sarah whispered, dropping to her knees. She tore her scarf and wrapped it around the wound while Mike scanned the shadows. "If she's here," he said, "the others can't be far." From somewhere inside the building came a low growl, familiar and commanding. "Rex." Mike's flashlight swept over the side door, its hinges half torn and the handle freshly bent. He pushed through. The temperature dropped instantly. The air smelled of cold metal and dust. Old crates lined the walls and tracks, boot prints and paw prints crisscrossed the concrete floor. Deeper inside, under the flickering remnants of emergency lights, he saw them. 4 men clustered near a steel container, their faces hidden under knit masks. The one barking orders was tall, lean, and carried himself with the rigid posture of a trained officer. His voice carried authority that made the others move without hesitation. Then, as the man turned toward the sound of the intruders, the flashlight caught his face, scarred, angular, with dark stubble tracing his jaw. His eyes, cold and pale as winter glass, froze on Mike's badge. "Walker," the man said evenly, lowering his weapon but not his stance. "You shouldn't have come here." Mike recognized him instantly from old photos. Captain Dale Mercer, once a decorated K-9 commander, dismissed 3 years ago for falsifying reports after a botched raid. He'd vanished soon after. Mercer had been a legend once, strict, brilliant, feared. But the man standing before him now looked hollowed out by guilt and something darker. "What the hell happened here, Mercer?" Mike demanded. Mercer's jaw tightened. Same thing that always happens when the truth's inconvenient. 3 of my dogs saved a child that night, a boy caught in the crossfire. But the operation went wrong. A suspect died. Higher-ups needed someone to blame. They called it reckless use of force. Ordered them put down. His voice cracked, barely perceptible. I couldn't do it. I tried to hide them. They ran. I thought they were gone for good, until your report hit the wire. Behind him, one of his men, a burly figure with a shaved head, snorted. He's wasting time, Cap. The shipment's ready. Mike's flashlight caught the stenciled markings on a crate. Unmarked pharmaceuticals, black market inventory worth millions. Illegal trafficking, Mike said. So this is what you've become. Mercer's expression flickered between shame and fury. You don't get it. They cut me out, ruined me. These people, he gestured at his crew, gave me a way back. But when I found out the dogs were still alive, he hesitated, lowering his gun. They don't deserve to die for my mistakes. Before Mike could answer, Rex appeared from the shadows, silent but imposing. He moved between them, head low, hackles raised, amber eyes locked on Mercer. The man flinched. Still protecting the innocent, Mercer murmured. Even now. A crash echoed from behind the crates. One of the smugglers had spotted Sarah near the entrance. "We've got company!" the man shouted, raising his weapon. Mike fired first, the muzzle flash lighting the warehouse. Chaos erupted. Rex lunged, knocking the gunman off balance while Sable, despite her injury, darted to flank. Sarah shouted for cover, her voice breaking through the noise. The wind howled through the broken roof, scattering snow and debris. Mercer grabbed Mike's shoulder, shouting over the gunfire, "Get her out!" But Mike didn't retreat. "Not without them!" Another shot rang out, this one sharper, closer. The burly smuggler had Mercer in his sights. Without hesitation, Rex threw himself forward, intercepting the bullet that should have hit Mike's chest. The sound was deafening. Rex yelped, then crumpled against the snow-slick floor. "Rex!" Sarah screamed. Mike fired again, dropping the shooter. The others fled toward the exit as sirens wailed in the distance. Sarah had called for backup. Mercer knelt beside Rex, blood seeping through his gloves. "I told you they were loyal," he whispered. Snow swept in through the broken windows, coating the floor in white. Rex's breathing came shallow, but his eyes, steady, unbroken, never left Mike's face. Outside, the blue-red lights of incoming patrols flickered through the storm. For the first time in years, Mike felt the sting of helplessness crawl through his chest. The snow beneath Rex turned crimson, and all he could do was hold on, whispering the only promise he could make in that frozen moment. "You're going home, boy. You're going home." The first rays of dawn broke across the city, brushing Denver's frozen skyline with shades of pale gold and rose. The storm had passed, leaving the streets hushed under a thick blanket of snow. The world seemed reborn, as if the night before, the gunfire, the blood, the chaos, had been only a fevered dream. But for Officer Michael Walker, sleep had been impossible. He sat slouched in a hard plastic chair inside Dr. Evelyn Hayes's veterinary clinic, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the operating room door. Dr. Hayes was a woman in her late 40s, tall and angular, her gray-streaked hair pulled into a bun that defied the fatigue of 20-hour shifts. Years of treating both animals and their grieving owners had etched faint lines around her eyes, but her movements were steady, precise, like a soldier in a white coat. She'd been one of the few vets in Denver still willing to take emergency calls during the storm. "He's strong," she had said earlier, her tone neither optimistic nor grim. But that bullet came too close to his lung. He's fighting. Mike rubbed his face with both hands, the calluses of years on the force scratching against his skin. His uniform was still stained with Rex's blood, dried into the seams of his sleeves. Across from him, Sarah sat silently, her slender figure hunched beneath a wool blanket. Her hair, once neatly brushed, hung loose and tangled, her eyes red but resolute. She'd refused to leave Rex's side even when the paramedics told her to. Her hand still trembled faintly from shock, yet when she spoke, her voice was calm. "He'll pull through. He's too stubborn not to." Mike gave a faint, crooked smile. "Sounds familiar." Hours crawled by. The clinic was quiet except for the faint hum of machinery and the ticking of a wall clock. Scout lay near the doorway, his golden-brown coat flecked with melting snow, ears twitching at every sound. Sable, now bandaged but alert, rested her chin on Sarah's boot, her eyes following every move that Mike made. When Dr. Hayes finally emerged, removing her gloves with a sigh, the world seemed to stop. "He's alive," she said simply. Sarah exhaled sharply, tears welling up before she could speak. Mike rose to his feet, his breath catching somewhere between relief and disbelief. "Can we see him?" Dr. Hayes nodded, her tired smile softening her stern features. "He's groggy, but he'll know you." Inside the dim recovery room, Rex lay on a padded mat beneath a heating lamp. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath shallow but steady. The shaved patch on his side revealed neat stitches running along the wound. When Mike knelt beside him, Rex stirred, eyes flickering open. The amber gleam returned, faint but unmistakable. "Hey, partner," Mike whispered, his voice breaking. "You still with us?" Rex blinked once, then lifted his paw weakly onto Mike's arm. The gesture undid him. He laughed, a sound cracked by emotion, and brushed the dog's fur gently. "You're still an officer, Rex," he said quietly. "Just a different kind of duty now." Sarah leaned in, resting her hand beside his. "You came back to us," she murmured, tears slipping down her cheeks. Rex's tail thumped once against the mat in answer. Outside, news had already spread. The warehouse raid had made headlines by sunrise. Ex-officer exposed in illegal trafficking. Hero K9s saved by Denver cop. Photos of the 3 shepherds, taken by the arriving officers, flooded social media. The town that had once whispered about the beasts under the bridge now couldn't stop talking about them. Neighbors came to the clinic with blankets, treats, even offers to help cover expenses. It wasn't pity. It was gratitude, raw and overdue. By noon, the snow had stopped completely. Mike and Sarah brought the dogs home. The little house felt warmer somehow, as if the storm had burned away its cold corners. The fireplace crackled, filling the room with orange light. Scout curled near the hearth, his head resting on his paws. Sable lay beside him, half asleep, her tail twitching in dreams. Rex, though still weak, refused to stay in his bed and instead positioned himself near the window, watching the falling snow like a sentinel. Sarah leaned her head against Mike's shoulder on the couch. The firelight softened the exhaustion on her face, giving her the look of someone who'd survived both war and winter. "They're home now," she said softly. "They're not alone anymore." Mike slipped an arm around her, his eyes on the 3 figures stretched across the rug. "No," he said, his voice low but certain. "None of us are." The sound of quiet breathing, the steady rhythm of peace filled the room. The storm outside had ended, but in its place came a stillness that felt earned, almost sacred. A few days later, as the sun set over Denver's rooftops, Mike stood on the porch with a small wooden plaque in his hands. The air was crisp, the snow glittering beneath the fading gold of evening. Sarah joined him, her scarf fluttering lightly in the wind. Together, they fixed the plaque to the front railing. The engraving was simple, but the weight behind it immense. Walker's Guardians, Rex, Scout, and Sable. When Mike stepped back, the wind shifted through the pines, carrying with it a faint, low bark from inside the house. He smiled, the sound sinking into the twilight like a promise kept. As the last light of day spread across the white horizon, 3 silhouettes moved behind the window, watchful, calm, and free. The city that had once ignored them now slept under their silent protection. And somewhere in that quiet, beneath the whisper of snow and the warmth of the fire, loyalty breathed again. Sometimes, miracles don't come as flashes of light from the heavens. They arrive quietly, in the form of a wagging tail, a steady heartbeat, or a second chance. For Mike and Sarah, those 3 shepherds weren't just rescues. They were reminders that God's grace can appear in the most unexpected corners of our lives, in broken creatures, in stormy nights, and in the courage to love what others have forgotten. In the end, it wasn't just the dogs who were saved. It was a man's faith, a woman's compassion, and a town's hardened heart. Under the Denver dawn, when snow glittered like heaven's dust, the walkers learned that no soul is too lost for redemption, and that sometimes angels don't wear wings, they wear fur. So if you're watching this story tonight, take a moment to believe in small miracles. Look for them in your own life, in kindness you give, in forgiveness you offer, or in the love that still waits quietly at your door. And if this story touched you, share it. Let someone else feel that same warmth. Comment below and tell us where you've seen God's hand at work. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story of hope, loyalty, and grace. May God bless you and your family, and may His light guide all the lost, 2-legged or 4, safely home.